Hey, I'm Bill Marion, and welcome to a very special edition of A Nose for Life. And it's a very special edition because this is my first attempt at a film commentary, and I'm choosing a very sensitive subject, Rogue One. I wish I could count how many different commentaries or critiques there are on YouTube alone about Rogue One or A Force Awakens or any of the Star Wars movies. And so I decided to weigh in there too about my opinion about Rogue One. Of course, an opinion about Rogue One is going to cross over to A Force Awakens as well, to the reboot of the franchise, also to the original Star Wars trilogy, and even the prequels. I mean, they all build on each other, as we'll talk about in just a few minutes. But first, I want to say that I am very grateful that you're watching all of this video. It's very important to me. Your opinion is important to me about this video. I would love to hear what you have to say in the comments. I do ask that you watch all of the video. When you weigh in on the comments, say whatever you like and share this video. I feel like, and I believe that I have a lot to say about Rogue One, but a lot of what I have to say I haven't seen other people, saying or commenting about. So I think I have something very unique to say, and I think you're going to enjoy this commentary. The use of copywritten images or video in this critique fall under fair use. But some of the videos or images that you'll see in this critique actually belong to me or friends of mine. In any case, we will cite all of our sources and the links in the description. So feel free to go through the links. And if the video belongs to me, you're more than welcome to use it. If you're a YouTube or a content creator, feel free to use my stuff. Just mention my YouTube site. I could use the subscribers. You ever notice today, though, that everybody seems to be an expert at, anything? I mean, if you go online, there's 50,000 different types of film critics, and everybody thinks that they can just simply weigh into their conversation about a movie. And maybe that's true when it comes to Star Wars. I mean, Star Wars is more than a movie. It's a part of our culture, it's a part of our politics, and let's just face it, Star Wars is kind of religious. And so you can even get into some pretty big arguments when you're talking about Star Wars. There's political discussions you shouldn't have at the table during the holidays, like who you voted for president. And there's also your opinion about Rogue One or Force Awakens. It can actually cause many divorces. You need to be very careful when talking about this kind of subject. But I do have to be honest, I'm not a film critic. I'm not a professional film critic. But I guess like everybody else, I have something to say about Star Wars. There are some experts, though, here on YouTube that are absolutely amazing. And I'll provide links in the description or maybe even during the video about some of the best film critics that I found on YouTube, and even some of the best Star Wars critics on YouTube that are just amazing, and they're 100% in. They're all in. They're just totally dedicated to being a Star Wars fan.
But if I didn't love and know a lot about Star Wars, and if it was just another cult film classic that I enjoyed, I probably wouldn't touch it because it wouldn't necessarily belong to me. I mean, there's entire groups of people that's all they do is study, cult film classics. For example, I think filmmaker Stanley Kubrick is fascinating, but I wouldn't offer insight about The Shining, 2001: A Space Odyssey, A Full Metal Jacket, Eyes Wide Shut, and so on. But that's really hard for me because I love Odyssey, and I've written a book that I hope to release this summer about science fiction on the big screen, and it goes without saying that Kubrick's Odyssey is, it's mentioned once or twice. I've done a great deal of research about that movie in particular and its possible meanings and so on, but having seen all of the great deal of amazing professional research about Kubrick's game-changing masterpiece all over the internet by people who love all things Kubrick, especially here on YouTube, I realize that I can have an opinion, I can voice my opinion, but chances are I'd be restating what's already been said by others who are more qualified and love the material as much, or probably more than I do. But more importantly, if I share my very unique opinions about Odyssey without providing footnotes, authentic Kubrick fans might turn me over to the newly established fake news police. But worse, I may come across offensive. And it's one thing to have a partially informed but intense conversation around the dinner table with family and friends about politics and religion and, yes, movies. It's something different, though, to spray those opinions like graffiti all over the internet. And while I would literally die, and yes, I do mean literally, to defend graffiti journalism or commentary, it's also known as fake news or uninformed opinion, even conspiracy theories and so on, I acknowledge graffiti is messy, it's expensive, and it always leads to more suppression of information and opinion. but it does serve a purpose, at least to minorities, including political minorities, in that it provides a canvas, often the only canvas, to express grievances and expose corruption or to shed light on new ideas. And this is important to think about when we talk about Star Wars as a franchise, because opinions matter, including opinions from those who aren't experts of any kind. And that's hard because we're living in a time in which brand protection is considered extremely important.
But Star Wars is like anything else. Everything today has a brand, and people are fighting for that brand and fighting to protect their image or their brand. I mean, even in the church world, it's the same way. Churches have a particular brand or a style, and they'll fight for that style and defend it, saying this is the right style. And it's all a form of branding. The truth of the matter is that when it comes to movies, you have an opinion, and you should be allowed to express that opinion. But like I said earlier, there are some movies that it's better not to weigh in unless you've studied that particular genre.
Like when someone invites his or herself into a film discussion about Chaplin's work in modern times, saying something like, "Who can actually sit through a silent movie?" Well, that's offensive. And by offensive, I just mean disrespectful to the genre and to the people who actually understand why it's an important discussion. And by the way, you really need to check out Chaplin's Modern Times, especially if you want to understand our modern times. Chaplin's almost prophetic in this movie. Check it out when you get time.
And that goes for any topic that we could discuss. Certain political discussions, it's best to stay out of them if you don't have your facts straight. And I've got close friends of mine like that. You know, they've got diehard opinions, and they're going to voice them, and they pander to their audience, and they're always getting, yeah, cheers. And it's like, wow, that was uninformed. That was so uninformed. You may be right, but your reasons are wrong, or whatever the case is. But I think Star Wars is something so unique. Star Wars is something so awesome because everybody can have an opinion. Everybody can weigh in, and everybody has something to say about it. But we are living in a kind of a crazy time where even comment sections on YouTube videos are being altered to where the comments are steered in a certain direction to where you kind of agree with what the branding of the particular YouTube channel you're watching is. Some of my favorite YouTube channels are passively censoring their comment section, and I find that to be just sick. Two of my favorite YouTubers, I won't mention their name because they're still two of my favorite YouTube creators ever, and I think it goes without saying that everybody probably likes these YouTubers to some extent because they're legends. But they've literally altered their comment section to where only positive comments kind of bubble up to the top. It's like that with everything now. I mean, every time somebody has a different opinion about something, everybody kind of launches into that person and tears them apart, and it's just a scary kind of time. But it doesn't have to be that way with Star Wars. What we have to do as fans, though, is make sure that we cover each other's back and make sure that all opinions are allowed to come to the table and that nobody has the right to dominate the discussion about any particular movie, and that a critique is always welcomed. That we should always invite people to the table to say, what's your opinion? I think when we pander to a particular audience who we know they're going to agree with us, whether it's politics or whether it's about movies, and you pander to a particular audience all the time and they all agree with you, you feel really good about yourself because you got all those likes on your channel or you got all those likes on your Facebook feed or whatever the case is, and you think, wow, I did a great job, I'm going to pat myself on the back. Really, you just pandered to people who believe exactly the way you believe. You've done nothing to extend the conversation out to people who think and believe differently. All you've done is isolated yourself even more from being able to influence anybody else, which is why all of that was to say this. Your comments, what you have to say in the comment section on this video, it's important to me. And if you totally disagree and hate it, it's fine. Put it in the comments. I just ask one thing, just subscribe because it'll help me out a little bit. But your comments are welcomed. And if you do have a comment and it disagrees with everything, hit the like button anyway, because your comment then becomes a part of this video. And I want your comments to be a part of this video, especially if your comments are honed in on what we're talking about here with Star Wars.
But Star Wars isn't a cult film classic. Let's get that out of the way right now. It's not just a movie, it's a part of our culture, our politics, and dare I say it, Star Wars is religious. And like politics and religion, when it comes to Star Wars, people tend to be opinionated and very vocal about their opinion. Star Wars doesn't belong to a genre film despite people trying to put it into science fiction or fantasy. Star Wars is its own genre, and it can only be compared to another part of itself. It doesn't matter how much you or I loved or hated Rogue One, it's still going to make a lot of money, and it doesn't matter what Disney churns out of its machine. seen. If it says Star Wars, we're going to buy it because we love it and it's ours. We can say whatever we want to about it. It belongs to us. What I'm not going to do in this critique is retell the stories and spend half your time telling you things that you already know. I'm assuming you love Star Wars and you've seen all the movies probably more than once, and I'm also assuming you have some common sense about being a fan. Like, being a Star Wars fan doesn't necessarily mean that you have to believe, or that I have to believe, that Han shot Greedo first, even though he most certainly did. And it doesn't mean that I have to loathe the Lucas Star Wars prequels, and I don't, but I don't really like them either. But you know who does? My son, who spent his entire boyhood watching the prequels again and again. And though I'm getting a little sidetracked by saying this, there's a backlash waiting for the serious prequel haters in a few years, and it's already bubbling here or there. Seriously, the voices of my son's generation will have something different to say about Lucas's prequels. Trust me on this. Lucas is a genius, and the success of A Force Awakens and Rogue One, they belong to Lucas, not Abrams, not Edwards, not Disney. These two men and Disney, they're just richer, more talented, more successful, harder working, and better looking versions of me or you, in that both men are simply Star Wars fans, but having earned the respect of their peers and a place in their industry, they each accepted the task of making Star Wars movies in the universe George Lucas created. Furthermore, they were empowered to do so with hindsight, 10 additional years of technological advances, in which Lucas laid the groundwork for, I might add, and serious corporate pressure not to create anything new. So why do we walk away from The Force Awakens and Rogue One feeling so satisfied with our experience? The story isn't new. The Force Awakens is given such a pass by its fans that it's almost as if the fix is in, but I'm an annoying participant in the fix. Or maybe the YouTube conspiracy network is right, and it's all a part of CERN and the Mandela effect or something in order to cover up a fake moon landing or a flat Earth. Okay, no, none of the above on every level, no. But I've seen A Force Awakens at least a half a dozen times, and no, not just in the comfort of my own home. My wife Carolyn and I went to see A Force Awakens 6 times at 4 different theaters. We wanted to experience every format that was available to us locally, driving 2 hours on 2 different occasions to 2 different cities. We didn't just like it, we loved it, but why? It should be garbage. The critics should have bashed it to pieces, and the fans should have been outraged that there was yet another Death Star, be it bigger and more powerful and able to defy physics in a way never imagined before. I mean, let's talk about that for just a second. That's true magic and sorcery. That planet Death Star thing in The Force Awakens is more magical than anything of the Jedi. It was downright ridiculous. And yet, I loved it. We all loved it. And not just a little love either, a whole lot of love. Adjusted for inflation, The Force Awakens is currently 3rd on the all-time highest grossing movie of all time list. Honestly, the formula used to adjust for inflation is horrible and inaccurate. If you get down right to it, the purchasing power of the dollar is less now than it ever has been. So the sacrifices that people made all over the world to see The Force Awakens again and again and again was greater than to see Avatar or the Titanic, the 2 James Cameron movies that hold the number 1 and 2 spots on the list. And let's just face it, Titanic had a broader appeal worldwide, and I understand that. Avatar, I'm sorry, Avatar fans, I'm just not so sure, and I'm not buying into that one yet. I hope the sequel gives me something to love, but I'm just not an Avatar fan. Please forgive me, and don't click off the video just because I said I don't like Avatar. My point is that most people love The Force Awakens, and yes, people love Rogue One. The box office doesn't lie, at least not all the time. And while creating this video, which is January 2nd, 2017, Rogue One is still dominating the box office. Currently, it's killing it, bringing in $616 million so far, and that's staggering. That's a staggering amount of money. So the jury is in. We love the reboot. We love The Force Awakens. And yes, we love Rogue One. But that doesn't take away the fact that there are some things that really need to change or be adjusted or fixed, however you want to put it.
I think what I found in doing research, though, for Rogue One is the fact of figuring out that I was wrong about some things. Leaving the movie and saying, oh my goodness, I absolutely love this movie, which is true. I loved Rogue One. It was amazing. But finding fault with certain things, going back and doing some research and realize, hey, Bill, you might have been wrong. And I can't wait to share that with you.
So the first thing I'm going to talk about is why Star Wars is different and why you can't really compare Star Wars to other films. And yes, you can read too much into a Star Wars movie. But second, I'm also going to talk about nostalgia versus story and why sometimes nostalgia is better than telling a real story. And that's just a fact. The final thing is the suspension of disbelief, or the suspension of belief, depending on who you ask, and how sometimes Rogue One as well as the A Force Awakens just fails in this area. And somebody's got to say something and address that. But Star Wars is not really science fiction. Let's face it, if we call it science fiction, the science part, at least in our universe or on our level of understanding, isn't so good. So let's agree, we haven't discovered midichlorians yet, thank God. Not to mention, science geeks everywhere tell us how bad the science is in Star Wars, and who cares? But here's where I do have to say thank thank you, J.J. Abrams, for providing us all with what science cannot, which is a unified theory of everything, sort of. Maybe not about the known universe or how the universe works, but that Star Trek and Star Wars fans can share the same space, divided only by space-time or timelines or maybe what's canon or not canon. But still, thank you, JJ, even though you destroyed my 30s by allowing a television show called Lost to end in such a miserable way. I watched your TED Talk, JJ. You're all about the mystery, not necessarily about the ending. I get that. But I think it's all about the ending sometimes. The ending does matter. And what bothers me the most is that you may have rebooted Star Wars just to give the Skywalker family a bland and boring ending. We'll see. But honestly, Star Wars is not science fiction. It's more like fantasy, or maybe a Western in space. And no, I am not within the first 100 people to have pointed that out. So many people have said this about Star Wars that I can't even find a first person that actually said it. Star Wars is just Star Wars. So when you talk about Star Wars or make a judgment about Star Wars, you have to judge it by its other movies. And A New Hope is that standard. It was a film that is loved by at least three generations, and a fourth one coming. And again, the box office doesn't lie. I'm in my 40s, and on opening night of The Force Awakens, I took my dad, my wife, and my kids to see it, and we were surrounded by people that they were doing all the same thing. Three generations represented in the theater. And three generations seeing a new Star Wars movie, I mean, come on, name another movie franchise that's pulled that off. You won't, because it's Star Wars, and nothing else will come close for some time, if ever. So as far as we know, the sensation will continue for generations to come. A New Hope was a game changer. It was a different kind of movie. It was very simple, and the movie Empire Strikes Back even raised the stakes. It was even a better movie. It's a much better movie than A New Hope. And then you have Return of the Jedi. Now, no, I'm not the first person to say this at all, but Return of the Jedi got a pass from fans and even some critics. But it doesn't even compare to A New Hope in any form or fashion. It doesn't compare to Empire Strikes Back at all. Return of the Jedi just failed to deliver. We get another Death Star, another small band of freedom fighters disabling the shields so the Death Star can be destroyed. We did get a Skywalker dealing with his daddy issues, and we were all thankful for that. And we got the end of galactic tyranny. Again. So why did the Return of Jedi get a pass from fans and critics? I don't know, and nobody really wants to talk about that. You get some YouTube channels here and there, but the reality is Return of the Jedi sucked. But because we wanted to see how it all would end, we paid to watch it, and we added to the canon of greatness of Star Wars. And yet at the same time, we didn't want the franchise to end, even though Return of the Jedi wasn't that good. We ignored the fact that Star Wars and Return of the Jedi are practically the same movie, and we allowed it. We allowed it because we came to the understanding that Lucas was going to introduce us to new characters or creatures, hashtag Ewoks for cannibals, and even if we knew where the journey was going to end, just minutes after Han Solo was rescued from Jabba's palace, we were thrilled by getting more of the same, and that's where it ended for a very long time. And then the prequels. Listen, I refuse to start a prequel bashing. There's enough of that on YouTube to cover my opinion and any other opinion for that matter. But I want to say this about the prequels. Yes, I hated Jar Jar, but I still appreciate Lucas's commitment to a darker story that was very creative and powerful. It's not the story I didn't like, it was the way Lucas told the story. I wish Lucas would have let someone else tell his story. Lucas failed at capturing the real problem. Palpatine successfully won over the Senate by lying, murdering, manipulating, and eliminating religious opposition with a mass-sanctioned execution or executing a religious purge. Wait, what's that? You didn't get that in the prequels? Well, it's there. All of it's there, and it's out in the open. But it's hidden by bad storytelling. Other YouTube creators have alluded to the fact that the prequels are actually genius, and I won't go that far. They could have been genius, but they weren't. I will say this. It is possible that Lucas intentionally papered over his story to make it intentionally convoluted because of the prequels were hitting too close to home from a certain perspective. One thing's for sure, Rogue One tackles the issues of religion, or an issue of religion. Again, we're not going to compare Rogue One to other movies that deal with current religious issues, other than to say it does so in a way in which the prequels might have intended to do, but definitely failed. Make no mistake, Edwards went out of his way to create a Star Wars version of Mecca or Jerusalem, a holy city on a planet that's a desert that happens to be loaded with a resource so valuable to the Empire that the Empire extracts the resource daily and sort of puts its thumb down on the entire population there. At one point, though, I wanted to say, I get it. We're talking about the Middle East and the U.S., and the U.S. is an empire, and it's all about perspective. I mean, much of the movie gives us perspective, that's for sure. There's a Star Destroyer over Jeddah to show us how big Star Destroyers are. Then there's the Star Destroyers beside the Death Star, and I could go on and on. The director wants us to think about perspective the entire movie, changing our point of view, putting ourselves in other people's shoes, so to speak, or understanding the size and scope of a situation, much like our own situation in the Middle East. The scenes at Jeddah make me uncomfortable at times, and let me be clear, I like being uncomfortable in movies if that serves a purpose. The stormtroopers' treatment of the citizens and the terrorism and the tanks rolling through the city, was I supposed to think about Iraq? Was I supposed to think about the Middle East in general? Was there a purpose in those early scenes to show me that there's something wrong with U.S. foreign policy? If not, Edwards missed a good chance to do so. I kept waiting for Edwards to make his point. I kept waiting for the exclamation point or the question mark or something. Edwards had this perfect setup about perspective, about the Middle East. I mean, he was preaching, whatever his point was, but we'll never know because he never really made his point. He showed us images to invoke some familiar feelings of what we see on the news, but he never said anything, and it really looked as if he was trying to say something. Maybe not. But I guess I would like to know what Edwards was trying to say, or if he was trying to say something at all. Either way, he accomplished his mission, which was showing the audience how the Death Star plans were obtained. And he did so by using familiar scenery that we see every night on the news. And by not providing a theme or an underlying meaning to the movie, that's what makes Star Wars, the entire franchise, different from other movie franchises or other movies. He doesn't have to have an underlying theme. The theme is Star Wars, and that's why Star Wars is different than everything else.